for people that don't know about the Citizens Assembly and sort of everything that's been going on, I suppose since last time we spoke, could you give us a bit of insight into, what's the crack as is?
There's been a lot. So I'll go back even a little bit further because I believe since we last spoke, I've actually went up and I presented myself to the government, to the Justice Committee. So I don't believe we spoke since then. So myself and Kenny Tynan, both of us Kenny has since stepped back, but we were directors of Patients for Safe Access, and we got invited up to make a submission presentation actually to the Justice Committee. The Justice Committee were looking at the consequences, the negative consequences or something along those lines of criminal sanctions for personal possession of drugs. So we made a submission, and based upon our submission, they got us up to make a presentation. And we went up there, myself, Kenny, we presented for Patients for Safe Access. We had Brendan, who was there representing another Irish cannabis legalisation group, CRAN. The Irish for trees, so a little kind of innuendo there for I think it's a famous Reddit group actually was trees, but it was like a cannabis group, but they called it trees to kind of hide it. So then they made the Irish version just under CRAN, which is the Irish word for trees, as I said. So those were two pro-cannabis groups presenting. Then we had a Portuguese presenter as well, Nundo. I'm forgetting the guy's title now, and his job position, but he was over in Portugal. He's working kind of within the drugs scene over there. I believe in the harm reduction side or the policy side, but he presented as well, kind of given the Portuguese side of it. And then we had the Cannabis Risk Alliance who were there, and they were the only group that were actually there giving a negative argument kind of in support of prohibition, if you will. We actually had a doctor there as well, an addiction doctor, Dr. Garrett McGovern, and he again was making a positive argument towards, changing this, the criminal sanctions for personal drugs possessions, just unjustified. Based upon the presentations given that day, and that Justice Committee was actually made up of representatives of all the political parties in the country at that time. The only one who was actually absent, I believe, was a representative from Sinn Féin. They were listed to be there on the day, but they were actually just missing for whatever reason, I believe. But that committee made 22 recommendations, which were published on the 14th of December, 2022. So in 2022, the 14th of December, they published these recommendations. The very first recommendation acknowledged the harms done and the ineffectiveness of criminalising people for personal drugs possession, and basically called for a different approach, that this was not effective. That was the very first recommendation. There was 22 other recommendations. The recommendations absolutely blew our minds. It went miles beyond what we were expecting as contributors to it. We were thinking at best, we were going to see a recommendation there towards, decriminalise the possession or something like that. Something, a little lighthearted, whatever, but they really went above and beyond with their recommendations. They went on to talk about social clubs, but not just for cannabis. They talked about plant-based drugs. There was one TD there at this on this Justice Committee, and kind of off camera when we were talking in the background, he was very interested in a conversation about plant-based drugs. The mushrooms, DMT, ayahuasca, stuff along those lines. He was very interested in that. And this guy was from one of the main parties. Don't really want to out the guy because I suppose it was a bit of a private conversation we were having, but it's totally unexpected where it came from. It just left the field. I was just tightened away by it. So 22 recommendations from them, absolutely amazing recommendations, but the government did absolutely nothing on it. A lot of what was being said is wait for the Citizens Assembly. That's pretty much kind of what was being said since December last year. So as campaigners, and being patient as well, we were kind of really pushing the government to be like, look, do something about these recommendations. But at the same time, we were kind of, hopefully this fucking Citizens Assembly will be the silver bullet we need once and for all to take this fucking monstrous prohibition out. But that's come and gone now, the Citizens Assembly. So that started in June. It went on for 6 months, so it would happen over a weekend, one weekend every month for 6 months, finishing in I think it finished in like October or something like that. It was a very positive finish to it in a sense. I would say very positive, just because look, I want to try to put a positive spin on it. Cannabis legalization, it lost out by one vote, which, we were really upset by it, but that's still, like, it only lost out by one vote. It was so close. But what did win? The vote that did win, and it won for all of them, and that was for a comprehensive health-led approach to drugs, and that was for all drugs. That was pretty much the outcome of the Citizens' Assembly. But prior to that vote happening, they had another vote, and that vote was asking them whether they wanted to maintain the status quo or to go with a different model. So it was saying take the same, stay with the status quo, take a different approach, but take the same approach for all drugs, or take a different approach and take a different approach for all drugs. And what the citizens voted for was that they would take a different approach, and that different approach would be different for all drugs. So they would look at each drug individually. And then when it came down to it, the votes on all the individual drugs, so like they voted on the legalization of, like, say, fucking cocaine, I believe that was in there. Like, they were voting on legalizing mushrooms and hallucinogenics, heroin and stuff like that. They got the vote and all of that. And what was the outcome of the vote was a comprehensive health-led approach for all of them. Sorry about that. So in the end, they ended up actually voting for the same approach for all the drugs. But the main thing to take away from that, and which is why I say it's a positive thing, is that the citizens overwhelmingly voted against the status quo. Over 85% of the citizens of the Citizens' Assembly, which is supposed to be a representative sample of the Irish population. So you can effectively say that 85% of the Irish population reject the status quo, which is the criminalisation of people for the personal use of drugs. And that was pretty much the outcome of it. That finished off, as I say, in October. The report was only just released today, I believe. The full report was released either today or no, it's actually been released officially tomorrow now, the full report from the Citizens' Assembly. But again, as I say, we know the outcome of the vote. And it was that they voted against the status quo. They voted for a comprehensive health-led approach to all drugs, which effectively is a decriminalisation approach to all drugs. Taking a health-led approach would be this health diversion program. So when you get caught with any amount of personal amount of drugs, then instead of being criminalised, you would be put into a health diversion program. Again, they would be helping you. Which we've obviously, for obvious reasons, that's still a massive issue. You get caught with a bit of cannabis and all of a sudden you need help, and we're going to put you into a health diversion program. But meanwhile, there's people out, like, for example, in Ireland at the moment, there's massive problems with waiting lists for clinicians, like, to see somebody. And what they're doing here in Ireland at the moment, the waiting lists are such a problem that they try to shorten the waiting lists. What the crafty bastards are doing within the health services, they're sending people letters in hope that they might have changed address or something. And the letter's basically asking you, hey, do you want to stay on the waiting list? Please respond to this letter within 2 weeks or we'll take you off the waiting list. So meanwhile, like, have you moved address? Like, and many people are moving address, and not by choice, because the landlord's up in the rent, because the landlord's deciding to fucking sell the house. Because unfortunately in this country, much probably like England, there's less and less people actually own their houses now. More and more people are having to rent their houses from landlords, and that's a problem, especially when you've the health service doing things like this. But meanwhile, they want to lump all this extra work now. Like, think about it. Like, you have 18,000 people every year being brought to court for the personal possession of drugs. That's 18,000 extra people now every year that they're going to want to put into a health diversion program, into a health system that, as I said, their waiting lists are so problematic that they're trying to take people off it. And like that's something that's quite personal to me, because I've got kids there who've been on some of these waiting lists for over 2 years, and I've seen those letters coming in the door, and I'm like, they're employing somebody to send out these fucking letters, but where's the employing somebody to fucking actually shorten the list by seeing the patients? Like, it's a broken system, much like the broken justice system.
It's performative, and actually, when you delve into it, you start to see the fingerprints of the same people. It is the consultation managerial class. It is the classmates of the politicians and the fancy schools that they went to, and they went and started a big data company. Oh, and they went and started, a company that we do specific training in a very niche area. Do you know what I mean? And we charge £1,000 a day. It's that slither of shit that rises to the top in all of our societies that want to perpetuate this shit, that are promoting this because they're making money from it. So now they've gone, whoa, whoa, whoa. What if we arbitrarily keep the law the way it is? So if we don't like that person, we could throw them in there. But if it's one of our kids, we put them on this diversion. And it'll be the same as the clinics right now. The clinics know people are smoking their fucking prescriptions. I've heard it out of the mouths of numerous prescribing doctors and people quite high up in some of the companies.
But that's illegal, apparently, isn't it?
Entirely, but they don't give a fuck because they're 30,000 plus. They're growing and growing every year. And if it then, look at something like, no offense to him, Big Nasty and his whole medical release of thing. Like, you guys are really muddying the fucking waters here. If you just, again, no offense to him, stick a lab coat on him and all of a sudden he's allowed to be providing a product that's a medicine. You're fucking with this. They're just creating a thing of going, the diversion schemes, to round off this point rather before I jump into the next fucking one, the diversion schemes will just be set up by them, private. It'll be another way, just outside of the health service. It'll cost us fucking money to use it, and we'll be told that we have to pay for it. They'll make money plus then government contracts on top of it, and it'll literally just be somebody like, are you all right? What's your name? All right, sit here. You just sit with your phone for like 3 hours, and then you'll have some paperwork. You sign the paperwork, and you've just been educated. And it'll be some absolute trifle of shit, and you'll be allowed to just go again, and then fall back in that system. And as long as they can have the illusion of control, and that fine, because they'll want to keep the fine alongside of it. So you'll have to pay for the course. You'll have to pay for travel to the course. You won't get compensated for the time you've lost at your job for being on the course. They'll then put you on like an extra probation that if they catch you again in 6 months, we'll double the fine, then double the time and all. It's an income, it's a tax at the end of the day, what they're trying to do here. Whereas their mates get caught up in it. Oh, don't worry about that. Yeah, you were there. Stamped. You're good.